The boardroom was silent except for the rhythmic hum of the city outside. Neon light from the skyline bled through the tall glass windows, cutting across the long mahogany table like a blade. At the head of that table sat Charles Vexler, CEO of Vextech Industries, a man whose name was whispered in the corridors of power with both admiration and fear. His tailored suit looked as though it had been stitched directly onto his ambition. Every gesture he made was deliberate, precise, and coldly elegant, like a chess player making his final move. For months, the tension within the company had been growing. Profits were up, yes, but the people beneath Charles had started plotting. Whispers of an internal coup, an attempt to push him out under the guise of a strategic restructuring. The instigator was his own protégé, Nathan Crow, a man Charles had molded from an eager analyst into the company's youngest executive vice president. Nathan was brilliant, confident, and dangerously charismatic. The board adored him. The press adored him. Charles, however, saw something else, a reflection of himself, only younger and far more reckless. It had begun innocently. Late-night meetings turned into subtle power moves. Nathan had started cultivating allies within the board, planting doubts about Charles's leadership. Every public statement, every minor slip was amplified. Charles watched it all unfold with the detached calm of a man who had seen betrayal too many times to be surprised by it. But underneath that calm was something darker, a slow, simmering rage that sharpened with every lie Nathan told. When the rumors reached their peak, talk of an emergency meeting to vote Charles out, he decided it was time to act. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. Instead, he smiled, shook Nathan's hand, and told him, "If you think you can run this company better than I can, I look forward to seeing you try." But Charles was not a man who believed in losing. The following week, an invitation arrived for the board's private retreat at the company's lakeside estate. It was an annual event, a weekend of luxury, whiskey, and quiet deals. Nathan attended without hesitation. He thought the game was already won. What he didn't know was that Charles had been planning something far more permanent than a resignation. That night, after the final toast, the group dispersed to their suites. The lake outside glistened black under the moonlight. Charles stood by the window of his office suite, watching the water ripple, listening to the wind hum against the glass. When he finally turned, Nathan was standing in the doorway, smug, confident, and slightly drunk. "You know, Charles," Nathan said, voice thick with self-assurance, "this company needs new blood. Your era's over." Charles smiled faintly, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. "You might be right," he said, handing one to Nathan. "But new blood often forgets who built the arteries it flows through." They drank. Nathan smirked, ready to deliver another speech about vision and progress, but his voice faltered. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the marble floor. His eyes widened. His breathing quickened. He staggered forward, gasping, clutching his throat. Charles stepped aside, his expression calm, almost regretful. "You should have stayed loyal, Nathan," he whispered. "Ambition is a fire. It burns everything it touches." Nathan collapsed within minutes. By morning, the staff found him at the foot of the stairs near the lakeside patio. The official report was clean. Accidental fall, alcohol involved, tragic but plausible. Charles delivered a tearful statement to the press, praising Nathan as a visionary gone too soon. No one questioned it. The board voted unanimously to keep Charles in power, citing stability and leadership during a difficult time. The media moved on within a week. Investors applauded his resilience. But there was one man who didn't move on. Elliot Voss, the company's chief legal counsel. He had been Nathan's friend and had noticed the inconsistencies, the missing footage from the retreat's cameras, the unaccounted timeline between midnight and dawn. He never confronted Charles directly, but he started collecting evidence quietly, piece by piece. Charles knew. He always knew. For months, the two danced around each other in polite silence, meetings filled with veiled remarks and tight smiles. Then one night, Elliot's car was found at the bottom of a ravine. Another tragedy. Another condolence statement. By the time the fiscal year ended, Charles Vexler stood stronger than ever. The company had doubled its market share. The board adored him again, and every portrait of him in the building looked slightly more sinister, as though the photographer had caught a flicker of the monster behind the man. He sat alone one evening in that same boardroom, staring out over the glittering city he ruled. He raised a glass to his reflection in the window, and for a brief moment, he smiled, not with pride, but with a cold satisfaction that tasted like power and poison combined. "Business," he murmured to the empty room, "is war. And in war, only one general walks away." The city lights blinked like distant stars, and somewhere below, the pulse of ambition beat on, oblivious to the blood it demanded. Charles Vexler had always believed that power was a living thing, something you didn't possess, but something that possessed you. It fed on fear, respect, and control. The moment you lost any one of those, it slipped away, searching for a stronger host. And Charles, after all these years, had no intention of letting it leave him. The weeks after Nathan's death unfolded like clockwork. Public mourning gave way to press releases, condolences turned into policy changes, and whispers faded into applause. The board praised his resilience. Investors sent flowers. Even the employees, those who had quietly rooted for Nathan's rise, now spoke of Charles with a strange, reverent fear. He had survived the storm. He had reclaimed his throne. But in the quiet hours of the night, when the skyscraper lights dimmed and the city outside fell into its electric slumber, the silence pressed harder than ever. Charles would often sit alone in his office, the same corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, like a god gazing upon his creation. On his desk sat a framed photo of the original board, the founding members of Vextech. Half of them were gone now. The rest had retired or disappeared into the shadows of non-compete clauses and NDAs. He was the last original architect left. He used to take pride in that fact. Now it only reminded him of how much blood had been spilled to keep his name engraved on that door. It wasn't long before the rumors began again, not of betrayal this time, but of ghosts. Strange emails arriving from Nathan's old account. Financial documents reappearing that had been deleted. A cryptic message that arrived one morning in Charles's private inbox. "You can bury a man, but you can't bury the truth." Charles froze when he read it. The sender was anonymous, the trace untraceable. He told himself it was a prank, a hacker, a disgruntled employee. But the unease lingered like a shadow behind his every thought. He had built his empire on precision, every move calculated, every risk accounted for. But this felt like something he couldn't control. He ordered a full audit of internal security. Every server, every device, every network was scrubbed clean. Yet the messages kept coming, each one more personal, more intimate, more knowing. "He trusted you. The lake remembers. You toasted to his death." The last one arrived with an attachment, a photo. Nathan's glass of scotch, half empty, the amber liquid reflecting Charles's own face from that night. That was the first time Charles felt fear in years. Real fear. He began suspecting everyone. The board, his assistants, his driver. Even his secretary, Evelyn, who had been with him for a decade, was not beyond suspicion. He started recording his meetings, locking his office, and taking different routes home each night. The paranoia settled into his bones like a disease. When the company's quarterly gala came around, he almost canceled it. But Vextech's public image demanded his presence. So he attended, dressed impeccably, smiling for cameras, shaking hands, toasting to innovation and legacy. The journalists saw the polished titan of industry. None saw the tremor in his hand as he raised his glass. During the dinner, a small black envelope appeared beside his plate. No one had seen who placed it there. His breath caught as he opened it. Inside, a single USB drive and a note. "Play this before midnight, or someone else will." Charles excused himself and retreated to his office upstairs. The gala music thumped faintly through the floor as he inserted the USB into his laptop. For a few seconds, the screen flickered to black. Then a video began to play, grainy, silent footage from the night of Nathan's death. It showed Charles standing beside Nathan's collapsing body, calm and deliberate, watching as he fell. The angle was from above, from a hidden camera he didn't know existed. His pulse quickened. Whoever had this footage had the power to destroy him entirely. The phone on his desk rang. A private line. He hesitated before answering. "Enjoying the show?" The voice was male, smooth, calm, unfamiliar. "What do you want?" Charles said, his voice sharp. "Justice," the voice replied. "Or something close to it." The line went dead. He stared at the city beyond the glass, the lights now looking less like stars and more like eyes. Watching, judging, waiting. He understood then that the empire he built was no fortress. It was a cage, and the bars were closing in. In the following days, a series of leaks hit the press. Financial inconsistencies, private communications, even internal memos suggesting corporate sabotage. Nothing directly incriminating, but enough to paint a picture of corruption. The board grew restless again. And then, on a gray Monday morning, a confidential file surfaced on social media. The CEO's deadly deal. The footage was attached. Within hours, Vexteca's stock plummeted. Reporters swarmed the building. The police reopened Nathan's case. Charles was summoned for questioning. But when officers arrived at his penthouse that evening, the door was locked from the inside. The lights were on, soft jazz playing faintly through hidden speakers. Charles Vexler sat at his desk, dressed in his usual immaculate suit, an untouched glass of scotch beside him. A single bullet hole marked his temple. On his monitor, the final message blinked across the screen. "You were right, Charles. Business is war. And you finally lost." The investigation that followed never found the source of the leaks. No fingerprints, no trace of the mysterious caller, no surviving copy of the video. The board moved quickly, installing a new CEO within weeks, releasing statements about tragedy and transition. And yet, sometimes, when the executives stayed late in the boardroom, they said they could still hear faint music playing from the upper floor, soft jazz drifting down the hallway, followed by the echo of a man's voice, whispering through the walls. Power never dies. It just changes hands.